Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third, town hall of the spring season. Very glad for the opportunity to say hello to you all today, though I really wish it were in our ballroom rather than over Facebook Live. If you've attended some of our prior town halls, I think you know the format by now. I may say a word or two in an introduction and to catch you up on some things happening at the college. But really, the lion's share of this is an opportunity to hear from you, hear what's on your mind, hear your questions, and to have a conversation between us. But before getting into that, what I really would like to do is just start with some acknowledgments and congratulations. Again, I'm hoping that we have students from the class of 24 coming to our college in the fall, and I want to welcome them again to this special community. I don't know, class of 24, if you had a chance this weekend to watch what we've called the senior celebration, which is where we had the opportunity to acknowledge the accomplishments of your counterparts, not high school seniors, but the seniors graduating from Gettysburg College. And if you haven't seen it, go to either our Gettysburg account or YouTube, and you will see what I think is a celebration that captures the essence of this place. From the heartfelt faculty comments to the spirit of the students as reflected, it is a signal of what a very special place it is that you're going to be joining, and you already have joined as members of the class of 2024. So please, if you have a moment, take a look at it. For our returning students, wow, and thank you. It has been an unusual semester. That is certainly the case. And the past semester wasn't always the easiest, but once again, you all have responded in that true Gettysburg way, with a sense of resiliency, a sense of optimism. I've heard from faculty about how you powered through the hard parts and celebrated each other still as we would if we were on campus. I've said this in a number of other settings, but the way this entire community has responded to this unprecedented set of circumstances has just left me remarkably proud to be a Gettysburgian. So to the returning students, thank you for all you did to make the last semester as successful as it was. We miss you. The campus is awfully quiet. To the class of 24, again, welcome. When you look at the video, I think you're going to see a little bit about what is ahead for you in your future. And I am looking forward to welcoming you all back onto campus and seeing that all you will do as Gettysburg College students. So the end of an academic year is an obvious point to step back a little bit and to reflect. And I've been doing some of that, as you would expect. And I think this year has called for us to do even more than we ordinarily would, just given the change in circumstances that we have experienced. So let me say a word or two about that before talking a little bit about the way we're proceeding in the fall. And I think my first and most important point is simply this. This past several months have underscored just how important it is to be together, have underscored just how important our residential liberal arts educational model is. And I've heard this from student after student after student. They recognize the enormous work and effort the faculty put into remote learning. And they recognize that they were making important academic progress. But they also recognize how much they wanted to be here, to be with their faculty, but also to be with one another. So much of what we do, so much of the learning that takes place here happens not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom as well. It is a place in which we have those conversations that perhaps are more informal, but in some ways more insightful than we get in other settings where we have fun together. So this sense of self is such a sense of place, is such a defining characteristic of this community. We have learned that. We have learned just how much we miss not being here and how important it is to be together. We are fundamentally a residential college, and that's where we give our most comprehensive experience. And so we are working diligently to do everything that we can to come back in the fall residentially. And let me say a word or two about that. By now, I suspect you all have seen my letter from a couple of weeks ago in which I outlined the way in which we are planning for the fall. And making sure that we are doing everything we can for a smooth and appropriate return to residence. And if that can't happen, for whatever set of reasons, that we are doing all that we can to ensure that any alternative structures are as vibrant as they possibly can be. So again, we are doing what you would expect of us. We are figuring out how we can best plan for the fall, but we're also doing contingency planning, just as we would expect for you all to do as you are preparing your academic work, thinking about one position, but also thinking about another. To this end, we have established 5 working groups, again, described in my note, but let me say a word or two about them. The first is the academic planning group. And in a sense, this is the group that is focusing on the curricular aspects of the fall. And I'm going to oversimplify their work pretty substantially, but bear with me while I do. But they're basically looking at 2 sets of issues. The first sets of issues are should we be making any adjustments to the academic calendar or to the curriculum in order to come back residentially in the fall? Now, you might say, this seems like a pretty obvious thing. We have always taught in semesters. If we're coming back residentially, why don't we just teach in the semester structures that we always have? And that may well be the right answer. But perhaps we might want to rejigger the calendar to have classes end before Thanksgiving. Maybe we should think about adjusting the flow of courses in a different way. And so the academic planning group is doing all of this hard work, looking as carefully and as comprehensively as possible about the way in which we can structure the fall curricularly and as a matter of the academic calendar so that a return to residence can be as effective as possible. But as I said a moment ago, they're also thinking about the possibility that we may need to teach some courses remotely. Maybe some students aren't going to feel comfortable coming back in the fall if that's what we do, or maybe the state imposes requirements or the virus exists in such a way that for whatever set of reasons, for some part of the fall, we are unable to teach remotely, to return residentially. And so the academic planning group is also doing the hard work necessary to make sure that we have learned our lessons from the spring that just was. That is, as we taught remotely this spring, what are some of the things that we thought we did well? What are some of the things that we think we can improve upon? We are surveying our students, we have surveyed the faculty, we're looking to learn, just as we would expect of you, we're expecting that of ourselves. What lessons can we learn? How can we improve the way in which we teach remotely if we're required to teach remotely for some or all of the fall? So that's one working group, and it's doing an awfully important set of work that will directly affect the way in which you all learn in the fall. The second working group is our international programs and off-campus travel team. Part of what it's focusing on is a set of issues relating to employee travel. I won't spend time on that, but they're also thinking about study abroad. What are the conditions under which students should be asked to return? We experienced some of this, of course, over the course of the spring. What lessons do we learn there? How do we apply them in the fall and in study abroad programs, which is, as I think you probably would imagine, a situation that continues to evolve. The third working group, and this is a group that also very much bears on the student experience, is the Residential Living and Co-Curricular Experience Working Group. And this group has a very broad mandate, and as a result of that, it is broken into subcommittees. But it is dealing with questions as broad as campus health and safety, counseling, housing, athletics, transportation, equity and inclusion, and other co-curricular activities. So again, a very, very broad mandate, working hard to make sure that a return to residence is as safe as it can be, is as effective as it can be, And if for whatever reason there isn't a return to residence for part or all of the semester, that we're doing all that we can to ensure that the co-curricular experiences are as robust as they possibly can. So again, this group is focusing on issues that are very central to your experience. If you've followed the media stories about how colleges and universities are thinking about the fall, you know some of the questions they're asking. What does social distancing look like in a residential community? What sort of testing should take place over what period of time? And with what frequency? Do we have, what capacity do we need to have to engage in testing? Is there a balance to be struck between a full residential experience on the one hand and the possible constraints on activities that may be helpful in an environment where a vaccine may not be yet fully available? These are the sorts of questions that this group of Gettysburgians is actively considering. And as you'd imagine, it's important and timely work. We have a fourth working group that's focusing on business and infrastructure. It's basically trying to make sure that we have a clear roadmap moving forward to the recovery of normal business operations. Just as we have gone to remote education by virtue of the requirements of the state and other judgments, we've also been working remotely now for a period of time by virtue of the orders from the governor. As those orders get lifted, we have a set of judgments that we need to make institutionally about how we return to working on campus fully. And so that working group is thinking about that. And then finally, we are being advised by a group of students, a student advisory group that we have put together in consultation with the Student Senate and the Dean of Students' office. And that group is doing important work as well, because it is serving as a resource for all of the other working groups to make sure that we understand the student perspective and that the student voice is being heard loudly as we come to judgments. We recognize that however the fall is structured, it is something that affects all of us and that affects your experience directly as students. And so that brings me to my final point, and that is we want to hear from you. If you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have concerns, reach out to us. If you look to the college's website, you will see that each of the working groups have points of contacts. There are email accounts that you can write to. Don't be bashful. We are looking for the widest range of perspectives. We recognize that wisdom is available throughout this whole campus. So please, if you have a moment, if you have a thought, if you have a concern, if you have a question, you have a stake in this. We want to hear from you. We want to get the benefit of your perspective. So with that, let me end so we can spend time in our conversation and answering questions. But I will end again simply by thanking you. Thanking you, returning students, for all that you have done to make this past semester as successful as it was. Thanking our incoming students for their commitment to become part of this college and to help make it a better place and to help us prepare you for the world that awaits you. I have this much to say, and that is the past several months have been a challenge in many respects, but we as a community will be stronger by virtue of it. We already are seeing the bonds tighten in this campus, and I am looking forward to welcoming you all back to this campus and to have the students do what they do so well, which is to bring this campus to life. With that, let me turn the microphone, as it were, over to Darrien Davenport, the Executive Director of the Office of Multicultural Engagement and the Assistant Vice President of College Life. Darrien has been watching your questions come in, and he will put them to me, and we will have the conversation continue. So Darrien, thank you.
Thank you so much, President Iuliano, for the opening. For those folks who are sharing time and virtual space with us, welcome. Please feel free to continue to send your questions in, and we will try to get to those as quickly as possible and answer as many as possible during our Facebook Live event, our town hall today. President Iuliano, you know, in your opening remarks, you talked a lot about fall programming, some of the things that the institution is doing to get ready for different alternatives. We're currently seeing some institutions announcing whether they're going to be virtual or whether they're going to be face-to-face. At what point, first question is, at what point or what date do you believe the institution will make a final decision on the fall semester?
It's a great question. And again, let me underscore that we are planning to come back residentially because that is what we do. And so the very point of the working groups is to do everything possible to make that a reality. So I start with that. And that's why the work that they're doing, as you know, Darren, because you're part of this effort, we're trying to make sure that we are looking at these issues as comprehensively as we possibly can, because there's a complicated interplay of issues that we're trying to make sure we understand. So the work is ongoing, it is active, it is important. I can't give an exact date as to when we're going to decide it, because part of what we're looking for example, is continued guidance from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There's a working group that the governor has convened that's speaking to questions of higher education. We're going to welcome the input that we get from the governor. So there are things like that that make it impossible to say we're going to decide by date X or date Y. But what we do recognize is that the community would like an answer as soon as we possibly can give it. And by the way, we would like to give an answer as soon as we possibly can give it, because there's a lot of planning that goes into the launch of an academic year, no matter how done. And the sooner we can get to that implementation, I think the better it is. So our goal is to decide this as soon as we can, but as responsibly as we can.
Okay, great. And we're having some questions come in, and they really align with the fall. One of the ones I want to read to you is from Christy Wonk Fink, who asked, are you consulting with medical personnel and making decisions as to whether or not it is safe to bring students back to residential life?
Christy, what a great question. The answer is yes. In fact, we have retained a company that is expert in student health circumstances to help advise us throughout this whole process, because I don't have a medical degree. Darren, I don't think you do unless you've been hiding it from me. And so we are looking to make sure that we are making judgments as informed as possible by health professionals. So not only have we retained this company, but I should also note that we are consulting with people in the field of public health as well to make sure that we have a full understanding about the way to move forward effectively and the pros and cons of various alternatives.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the question. Next question we have is from Shannon Zeltman. And Shannon asked, will only some students come back on campus, or will it be everyone if we are back?
Shannon, another good question. That's one of the things that the various working groups is assessing, right? The question of do we need to, this is not a very elegant phrase, but do we need to de-densify the community in order to come back in a way that will work effectively is a question that is actively being examined. So what I will say is that we're looking broadly at a range of alternatives. And part of the reason, in answer to the question of a moment ago, that I can't say we're going to decide by date X, is we really do want to understand the interplay of these alternatives. So it's an option on the table. Whether it's where we're going to head, I don't know the answer to that, because we're still looking to make sure that we fully understand what's possible. By the way, is it our preference? Our preference is to have everyone back, of course, because that's where we're at our best. So if we can do that, that's what we'll do. The question is, can we?
Great. Thank you, President Iuliano. We've had a question come in, same question from two different individuals. One person was Lisa McGowan Seymour, and another was Lori Hopkirk, who is a parent for the class of 23. Basically asking, are you considering either starting early in August or maybe ending at Thanksgiving? And how viable is the movement of that calendar for Gettysburg College?
So Lisa and Laura, thank you. I think in my introductory comments, I noted that that was one of the things that we are looking a little bit at. Less candidly, because I think that it's not clear to me that the virus has a lot of seasonality to it. But if we do move the calendar, it may be because we might want to avoid people coming back and forth at Thanksgiving. So that's a question that we're looking at, and I know a number of other institutions have been considering as well.
Great.
And by the way, it's one of the things that the academic planning group has front and center on its agenda.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question we have comes in from Carrie Gambasia Shannon, who asks, are international students returning this fall?
I certainly hope so. And we still have international students on our campus who were unable for a variety of reasons to go home. We have a robust representation of international students in the class of 2024. They are important members of our community. They add a set of experiences and perspectives that we simply don't get otherwise. It's a reflection as well about why we so value study abroad and why last spring was so regrettable when the study abroad experiences got disrupted. So we are very hopeful that international students will be back with us in the fall. Some things we don't control. There may be aspects of this we don't control.
Great. Thank you so much. In discussing this virtual space, President Iuliano, often from an academic standpoint, folks will ask about the pricing if we go to a virtual environment. A question from T. David Oldweiler asked, if classes are online, will that shift tuition given the experience will be significantly less?
Well, I would say the experience would be significantly different, perhaps. I'm not sure I will agree necessarily that it will be less. I mean, I think part of the answer is this is among the variables that the business continuity group is considering. I think our responsibility, it's akin to what I tried to say in my introductory comments as well, is to make sure that we learn the lessons from the spring. And if we are required to teach any part of the fall or any part of next year virtually, I'm expecting that we will have reflected between now and the fall on ways in which the pedagogy can be yet further strengthened. I think that's, again, we ask our students to reflect on their own experiences. We as an institution need to do the same thing. We as an institution are doing that now. And so even to the extent that there are folks who feel like the spring semester may not have gone as ideally as they would have liked, and I would share that to some extent, the fall, I hope and expect, will be very different, even if we have to do something remotely, because we will be better. We will have learned more. We will have more of an opportunity, more of a planning process to make sure that we are integrating curricular and co-curricular activities in a way that was just harder to do on a 2-week pivot that we had. Yes, we will be thinking about the proper pricing model on whether there are adjustments necessary to tuition if we have to do that. But I actually want to just underscore my point that part of what we're doing now is to make sure that regardless of what the fall looks like, this college is meeting its highest standards for pedagogy, curricular, co-curricular experiences. And we have a little bit of the benefit, if that's the right way to phrase it, Darien, of some time this time to plan. And that's why the working groups that I've set up are so fundamentally important. So that's a longer answer than the question actually offered, but I thought it was important to broaden the point that we really are looking to make sure that we are giving our students the very best experience possible, regardless of formats.
Great, thank you so much. President Iuliano, we know that COVID has impacted, the nation financially. It's impacted higher education financially, which leads to a question brought up by Jason Method, who asked, how is the college's budget and finances looking at this point?
So the college is strong. I mean, obviously we got affected like everybody else did. And an impartial answer to the prior question, it's not that remote teaching is less expensive. In some respects, it's more expensive for us to do, given some of the technological and other training requirements that we have in order to stand it up. This is a strong college. It has been remarkably well managed over the years. It has a robust endowment. The college is going to be financially more than fine. That doesn't mean that this hasn't been a period of financial disruption. It has been. The refund of room and board last semester resulted in a $7 million deficit to the college. We will have to make adjustments in order to accommodate that. And again, we're devoting resources to make sure that our fall pedagogy, regardless of how we do it, is as good as it possibly can be. If we come back residentially, there are undoubtedly going to be additional resources we're going to have to deploy in order to create the infrastructure in which we're able to come back, whether it is more testing, whether it is social distancing. There are things that we're going to have to do that will have economic consequences to the college, but we're committed, as always, to doing what we need to do to make sure that our students have the proper educational experience. So bottom line, college is a strong, well-managed institution. Yes, we were affected by this. The effect wasn't trivial. We will work our way through it, and we will devote the resources we need to make sure that our students are getting the experience that they deserve.
Great. Thank you so much. Staying kind of along that line, there's been discussion, of course, in greater society that the money that the federal government has outlined through the CARES Act through higher education. Ashley Blackwell, class of 23, asked, what is going to be done with the CARES Act money and when will students have access to it?
So Ashley, thank you for that question. The CARES Act turns out to be far more complicated than the media has allowed it to be. And so we're still trying to understand what the conditions might be that would permit us to take the money. And so that work is still ongoing. We're getting closer to coming to a judgment about that. And as you may know, Ashley, the money comes in two forms. Half of it goes institutionally, half of it goes to students. We're pretty far down our planning process, should we accept the money, about the work that the students would need to do in order to become eligible for that money, again, imposed by federal requirements, not our own requirements. And hope once we have made a decision and once we've received the money to act as quickly as possible to distribute that money to the students who are eligible to receive it.
Great, thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, but something that has been on a few folks' minds is health and safety on campus. And Colette Cole, who is a parent of a student for the class of 21, asked, how will you keep students, faculty, and staff safe if you are open on campus for the fall semester?
Colette, it's exactly the question that one of the working groups is answering. It's exactly the reason why we have hired medical expertise to help us understand the best way to proceed if we open residentially. So whether, again, that's social distancing, whether it's the existence of PPE equipment, those are the sets of judgments that we need to come to, both what we should be doing and then what we are able to do, what our students would want us to do as well as a constraint on their otherwise autonomy. I mean, one way of saying this, Colette, is that if we come back residentially, it isn't unlikely to be the way it was last fall, right? There will be some constraints on student autonomy that will necessarily need to be imposed in order to advance some of the health and safety issues. And the question is going to be those balances and what's possible for us to effectively do. And those are again, precisely the reasons that we have this working group, precisely the reasons that we've retained medical expertise, precisely the reasons we're talking to public health experts, and precisely the reason that we're interested to hear what the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will advise as well as its working group proceeds.
Great. Thank you so much. You talked earlier about our ability to be able to pivot in the spring when things changed and the kind of access that we created for students. We have a question regarding incoming class. I'm a member of the class of 2024.
Welcome.
What support will Gettysburg offer if we are remote in the fall?
Substantial support, starting with you will soon be able to, very soon, be able to select your first year seminar. And the first year seminar is such a wonderful experience at Gettysburg College. It's an intimate group. The topics you've seen, I believe you have already, about the topics that we teach at our first year seminar. And we're going to be bringing together that cohort of students well before the fall, together with faculty and others. And it will become a first introduction to the community that can happen sooner rather than later. So that's one of the things that we're doing. One of the working groups is very much focused as well on the question of how do we ensure that one of the special aspects of this place that I alluded to in my opening comments is the nature of place, the sense of community, the way in which we both challenge and support one another. One of the things that the working group is doing is asking the questions, again, looking from what we did in the spring, but more with an eye towards what can we do in the fall to make sure that we are building that sense of community as effectively as possible. So whether it is the first year seminar, whether it's other activities that can happen remotely, whether it's introductions to our alumni community. We have a remarkable alumni community, and so we are working on a series of, we hope we'll be able to pull this off, but a series of conversations with prominent Gettysburg alumni, also as a means of just introducing you to them and their experiences here and their life path. So this is high on our mind. It is important because it's one of the things that defines this place is the special sense of community. And so we will be working on it. We are working on it. It's something that this college does well, and it's something that we're committed to doing in a virtual environment if we find ourselves there to the very best of our ability.
Great. And I want to, if I can, kind of hang on to that last point there. Because of our community and how great the environment is, face to face, and how we also try to do that virtually. We have certain things, certain traditions, right? So one that would come up in the fall for a lot of families is Convocation. How can we welcome families to the college community, maybe if there isn't an in-person convocation, but still build that sense of community and welcome them to Gettysburg College?
Well, we will need to find the right way to do it. One of the reasons, if I can digress for a moment, one of the reasons that we had the senior celebration, but not a graduation on May 17th, is that there's a really special tradition here at Gettysburg College, and it relates to the first year convocation. The first years walk through Pennsylvania Hall, the main administrative building now of the college, back at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, what was the main building on the college campus and became a hospital for the wounded soldiers from both sides. So students walk through Pennsylvania Hall in one direction as they matriculate as first years, and then at graduation, they walk through the other direction to reflect and symbolize their entry into the world at large. And we think that tradition really matters, both symbolically and emotionally. And if you talk to our students, you will see that it really does matter to them. And so we did not want to have a virtual graduation if we could avoid it. We wanted to give our students the opportunity to walk out through Pennsylvania Hall into the world that awaits them. We're going to make sure that we do things like that for our incoming students as well. The other thing to remember is that regardless of what might happen with the fall, for the class of 2024, you're with us for 4 years. We are going to find 1,000 different ways to create those traditions that connect you to each other, connect you to this college. We're going to start as early as we can. But our commitment to you is a 4-year commitment. And I have no doubt that when you leave, again, if you go back and you watch the video about the senior celebration, when you leave, you will find the same emotional reaction I had to the senior celebration video, which was just a statement of what a special place this is. And I can see, Darren, you're smiling and having a bit of the same reaction.
Absolutely. Every time I watch it, I've watched it multiple times. Every time I watch the senior celebration, it just it gets me pretty emotional. So it's so well done and really speaks to our community. So yes, thank you so much, President Iuliano. We're going to ask for closing remarks, but just for folks, housekeeping items. If we did not get a chance to get to your question, we're going to attempt to corral those and get some responses to you as soon as possible. But we do want to thank you for submitting them. And what I'd like to do is just pass it back to President Iuliano for some closing remarks for the folks in our community.
Well, again, to our returning students, congratulations on completing one of the more unusual years in this college's history. And that says something. I mean, not every college has had a battle right outside its building. So this is one of the more unusual semesters, and it was made what it was by virtue of your commitment, the commitment of our faculty, the commitment of so many different people. You have earned your summer. I know that much is true. I also know your summer has been a bit disrupted. It seems to be the way of the world. I said to the seniors, though, something that I want to say to all of you, including the seniors in high school who will soon be joining us, and that is the lessons that we have learned over the course of the last several months are as much a part of the education that you all will get here and the education you will get in life as anything you will ever learn anywhere. It will take some time, I think, for all of us to gain the perspective that we need to truly understand it. But you have grown by virtue of this. You may not fully see it yet, but this has been an instructive and informative moment in all of our lives. It will change the way we look at the world. And our goal, I think, as a community is to reflect upon that, to learn from it, and again, to find the opportunity to do what we do so well here, which is to get our hands a little dirty, to get engaged, and to make the world a better place. So with that, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I really do look forward to seeing you on our campus in the fall, doing what students do, which is bringing this place to life. So thank you.